Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is the TomoQuads Swift. This is 78mm motor post, and it is an indoor brushless flyer. And it weighs 61.2 grams. So this one's a bit delayed. Not because of anything like parts or anything like that, but just because I have not been flying very well, and I didn't want to bring you a bunch of little tiny bits of decent flying footage. I was actually trying to put a full pack that was at least reasonable, and I just, I had one of those weeks where, starting a new job and other things going on in life where maybe I was a bit hurried and a bit pressured or stressed about it, and it took me, almost 2 weeks of flying this thing before I had a decent flight, and I don't think I actually have as good a flight footage this time around as I did last time around. But hopefully I represented how much fun this can be in the flight footage that you have already seen and will see. As far as the build goes, this was a pretty straightforward build. I've done 3 of these now. Oh, batteries are done. A couple things to note is I used the CM275, which is a fairly narrow camera, and I found it was a bit rattly in there. I actually thought for a time that my PIDs were off, causing some vibration, but after going through some gyrations there, I found out it was my camera rattling around. So I just stuffed some foam in there. You can do other things to make sure that yours doesn't rattle around. I also found that this top pod was a little bit loose, so I put hot glue. This is actually probably the 3rd round of hot glue on these sides to kind of secure the top pod. And I've crashed this one a lot. I have actually attempted to practice some indoor acro, and I do have an injury to report. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Oh, right here. I cracked this. You can kind of see that white line right there, hopefully. But this one's pretty tough. I mean, I am acro challenged, and I did not do it justice by pounding it into the floor a number of times. And you'll note this in the build video that I really like this camera pod design. I think there's a lot of ingenuity that went into this, and I'll go over it here real quick. One, it protects the camera pretty well, so even if you have a direct crash upside down, if you have just a modest amount of protection up here, we shouldn't have any problems with the antenna unless it's the actual end that sticks outside of the aluminum casing. You can adjust the camera tilt by loosening these screws and then rotating it. At first you might find that you have to pull the screws all the way out, but after you kind of remount some positions, it will rotate with the screws still in place. You can reach the channel switches up here through this hole, and you can see your LEDs through the rear hole, and it's got another spot in the bottom. I don't know if you can see that, where you can take your camera wire down through the bottom of the pod so you don't have to loop it around or come outside. It was pretty tight with the top pod, and I actually put it on wrong the first time. Hopefully you can see this. Here, let me get some extra light. There's 2 little notches right down through here, and both on the front and the back sides. And I actually had this carbon fiber plate here rotated 90 degrees because I thought these flat edges would help to decrease the wiggle of the top pod. But those notches, and the reason why these are flat is because it's designed to run your antenna wires right up through there, and you can see that if you do that, then you have clearance for them. In my case, mine are so wide and kind of out of position, I should have shoved it forward just a touch more. I just laid mine down here along the edges and then used a little silicone tape to secure them down. And you do see I have some hits here. I used originally 6mm standoffs right in here, and I had to move to 8mm standoffs because while they would clear when you'd spin them by hand, when you hit the throttle you would get knocks right into this bottom plate, so it actually knocked a few little kinks in my props. This is held together very well. I don't have any problems with the structure or design. I do think that the one thing that maybe you might be concerned about is the weight. What comes in on the heavier end of the three that we've built so far at 60 grams. We have a substantial number of pieces here, so that's probably where some of the weight comes from. I've seen on other builds, not like this one, but on other 3D printed props where the bottom plate is 3D printed where that snaps off. I haven't had any issues with that. You can see I've secured my ESCs with a little bit more silicone tape. You can see these cross braces here that come right off the edge. And all these things are printed very, very well. And when you put these screws in, it's nice and snug. Of course, you want to be careful. You don't want to get all hulky on it and really strip it out because it is 3D printed. I have another guard I can show you here. I bought one. It's blue. And you can kind of see the design. And you just, I think, I didn't try this, but I think you might be able to just push this on around the long nylon screws. It may just snap on because why else would they be open-ended here? So they may just snap on. And you can then, I wonder why this one's flat like that. So you may be able to take this one on and off without too much fuss and be able to fly it outdoors if you wanted to fly it without this guard. But since I ordered mine, they added colors, so I bought another one of these, and it comes with a kit. Also with your stock kit for this little guy, here, let me turn this light off. It comes with a few extra pieces here. We've got an extra camera pod that's just like this one, and then we have another camera mount. If you can, here, let me get it out. So you have another camera pod just like this. The camera just snaps into, and this will probably decrease your weight a bit because you won't need these carbon fiber pieces, and you won't have the bigger pod because that is fairly substantial. We can take a closer look at that too. So it's relatively thick 3D printing, so that's going to add some weight. Let's compare these two. Well, this one will require the two side plates that you see on the pod. Well, using this pod will require that we use the side plates and the carbon fiber plate. So there would actually be a greater weight loss if going to this one. But let's just see what these two pieces weigh. 1.6 grams. 1.4 grams, so virtually no difference in actually 3D printing weight, but you can decrease some weight because you'll be able to remove these other pieces. But your camera tilt, you're stuck with what you got right there, which is a little bit. That should be fine. In the kit, you also get these little pieces here, and these go right where those would be. They're just little gap fillers, so if you take off the prop guard, you put these on, and that way you can fly it without the prop guard. The batteries that I have been using are the ones I've featured several times before, but I've added to my collection a bit. So these are all fine. This is a 300 mAh battery. This is a 300 mAh battery. You can really only get this one if you special order from mylipo.de. They don't have them in the US shop. This is a 350, which is also nice and fine. This is a 450, which is acceptable, but it starts to get a little bit weighty. Right at about this. I believe this one's 26 grams. And then we have the Venom Fly 300, and this one's fine as well. Unfortunately, we have all these connectors where we've got a little weight we don't need in wire and connectors. So you can use these batteries and they will work just fine. Of course, with micros, we have a limited amount of thrust. The more weight we put on the bottom end, the higher on the throttle curve we're going to be operating. And therefore, if you make an aggressive maneuver into a corner or trying to do some acro, you're going to have to hit it even harder. So there's going to be diminished returns as far as flight time goes with weight of battery. So if you start getting above 450, you're probably going to find your flight time isn't going to go up. With a 300 mAh battery, I get about a 3-minute, 320, depending upon the flight time. 350, I can go about 10 or 15 seconds more, and then you can go about a minute more on these. But I find it harder to fly with this battery because of the amount of weight that's being pulled into corners. that I can adjust. And when you're flying indoor, you know, your corners are tight, the space is limited. So I would stay with, you know, lower weight, shorter flight times, and just stock up with 2S batteries. Okay, the next section of the video we'll have a full flight, and then we'll do the build, and I'll have one more probably subpar flight. If you have any questions or comments about this quad, there are more coming. We haven't seen any RTFs yet, but this is the third indoor build we've done, and I've got one more build that's already completed. It's actually sitting up there. We'll feature that this week after I get some hopefully decent flights in. I've already flown it a few times. Hopefully my stick skills have returned. And then we'll hopefully start to see some of the arrival of the ready-to-fly stuff, so you don't have to build if you're looking for something like this. Okay, thanks for watching, everybody. Next up, a big flight, then we'll do the build. We have all our kit contents laid out here, and what you don't see that we do get with the kit is we get a nice little exploded view of how the frame goes together. And he's also got some really nice pictures on his website, TomoQuads.com. And we've got bottom shots, we've got beauty shots, we've got everything we need, I think, to be able to put this together without too many of my typical mistakes. We will be mounting the ESCs to the bottom side of the carbon fiber plate. And the slots in there should make things nice and easy. This is our plate to mount on the bottom. Our ESCs will kind of go in each one of these slots from the bottom. And then this plate is used underneath this for our battery strap. And then we've got our motors. These are the 1103 8000 kV, and you're probably saying, why 8000, why not the 10,000? I do have some 10,000s, but I'm going to use those in the next build. I think the 10,000s are probably just better for top end speed. If you're needing quick punch and you've got possibly some heavy props, the 8000 kV are going to serve you a little bit better. So for flying inside with furious props, I think the 8000s will probably suit us just fine. If you're wanting more top end speed outside and you have some lighter props, maybe some 2 or 3 bladed props, 10,000 would be the way to go. So the wiring and the build process doesn't matter. It's just how do you want to fly it? Where are you going to fly it? We've also got our Piko BLX right here, and our CM275T, some 3M tape in case we need it. Our 6 amp RacerStar ESCs. We've got some more mounting and hardware stuff over here. The battery strap came with the kit. I'll probably cut this part off though, because that always makes me a little bit crazy. I'll just snip that down here. We've got, it looks like 3 camera mounts over here, and I don't know if I ordered extra or if they come stock extra, but if they come stock extra, way cool. And you have 2 different options if you want to go with this rounded kind, or if you want to go with a more traditional clip-in kind, you have that as well. It just kind of depends on what you want. So I am going to start by assembling the bits that we might need to be assembled, probably mount my motors, and we'll get to the point where we're getting ready to connect the motors to the ESCs, and we'll go from there. As you can see, I've got all our motors mounted, and I don't have any of the bottom plates on. And you can also see that the motor wires go through these little slots nicely, and how I think they're designed to be mounted is doing the wrap of the motor wires. So we place our ESC down here. Let me get this stuff out of the way. And then we take our motor wires up and over the top. And that will allow us, if we chose to, take some heat shrink and slide it all over this and then heat it up and shrink it down to that for a nice clean look. And that is how Tomo has built his, according to his pictures, I do believe. So I've got every motor wire here stripped. If you can see those little tiny pieces, they're really hard to see. And I have found that I'm getting better with these. And I use these to strip. And I think I'm just starting to get the tension on it. And more than one of you have suggested using a lighter or flame method, to where you heat up the end and then you strip it real quick with your fingertips. I don't have any matches, so I would have to go over to the stove. I guess I do have matches. They're huge, long fireplace matches, though. I'm not going to bring those down here. So that's a technique you might want to also try. We're all set. We're going to do a couple of tinnings here for the ESCs, in case you haven't seen that before, and then we'll place them on the quad itself. So I'm right-handed, so I like to use my iron from the right. So we just lay a little bit of heat down. I hope my iron's nice and hot. We don't need a lot. We got little tiny motors, but we want to get that pad warm so that it has a good bond. Oops, that's not good. There we go. I'm a little further away on this one. So that's how you would tin up your ESCs. Now I'm going to take this one because it has the smallest amount of blue tack stuck to the bottom, and I've also got a little bit of blue tack down here to hold this in place, and I'm going to add a bit more to one other motor here so that it doesn't turn on me. Won't hurt the motor none. So I just split a couple of these wires. Let me get these out of the way for filming purposes, and we put those in between here. And I don't really care which wire goes to which pad, because in the end we can use the Chrome app BL Heli to reverse direction on the motors, or you can use the BL Heli suite if you prefer that, or if you're running on a machine where you can't run Chrome and you can't get the Chrome app, then you can download the BL Heli suite software and do it that way. So I'm going to put my ESC here. Well, I might not have enough blue tack. Let me get a touch more. When you're building these micros, changing the motor wires is a bit more of a pain than doing it on a much bigger quad. I'm going to go ahead and add some solder here to the wires. I don't know if this does us any good or not. These motor wires are so small. I do believe it's just a single strand, but in case it does us some good, we'll go ahead and leave it there. I always put a little kink down here, so it gives me a little leverage point. Heat up that, let it cure, give it a little pull, a little kink. I'll leave them towards the end of the tweezers. It's hard to see from way back here. Okay, a little pull test got good. Okay, so that's one motor done, one ESC done. Do that to the rest of yours, and then we'll come back, and what we'll do is we'll be threading all these wires from the ESC up through the center and then back around, and we'll bring those to our PDB after mounting. And once we get these down through there, we will need to mount our carbon fiber plate for our battery strap and this plate that goes down on those corners. And we have these extra long nylon screws in here. It'll go all the way through our stack. Alright, so I've got all our ESCs and motors connected there, and I used a little bit of silicone tape. It's vulcanized to itself. It doesn't stick to anything else, and that's very, very temporary until I get confirmation that I've got the motor set up and spinning in the correct way. If you wanted to, you can solder these straight through when you want a clockwise motor, and you can cross any two wires to get a counterclockwise motor. Or if you're working on something that's different, and if the motors are designed to go one way, then you just cross any two wires to make them go the other way. And then here up top, I've taken a little bit of my ugliest electrical tape. Now, it's not all that ugly. I've got uglier, but I've got some purple electrical tape on my groupings to make sure I keep all the wires together. And now we're ready to put the PDB and those things on, and it will go on like so. I think normally at this point you'd want to make sure you have your battery strap in. So we've got these extra long nylon standoffs, and we've got our 3D printed bottom plate and our carbon fiber piece, and that one's not going in all that great. Come on. The other's just slid in. What's going on here? It's always the last one. I'm going to go ahead and I think I'm going to go ahead and use the red battery strap that came with it. I'm going to cut that end off and run that through, and then I'll get our Piko mounted up, and we'll go forward from there. So this is how the bottom stack goes together, and we'll run it up through into our Piko. You can see over here I've got our Piko. I went ahead and put a battery lead on it, and I tinned up the pads we're going to need, and we will be mounting this 45 degrees. So I plugged in my Piko, and I set a few parameters, and one of them is to rotate this a -45, which you'll need to do as well in order to get the nose essentially will be over here rather than straight on like this as the arrow indicates. And you can see here I've got the prop guard on, and the Piko will rest on top of the prop guard. There are 4 little screws. They line up perfectly with this prop guard, and it really gives it some stiffness out here on the outer edge, and I think that design minimizes weight. But the structure, you know, we're most likely going to be hitting on these outside corners. It's pretty rare that you hit in here unless you're flying outside in a branch or you center a chair leg or something of that nature. So that minimizes weight, but gives us what we need as far as protection. And you can see I've also taken my ESC wires and I've routed them up through here. And because our pads are on the front and rear of the Piko, I've routed these wires this way, and I've grouped them together to keep them straight. And this little gap will be necessary also because of the Spectrum satellite connector over here. So let's go ahead and attach this. Hopefully I can do this while all in frame. It can be a little fidgety sometimes getting everything manipulated down. I've got a screw that does want to go out. This is always the part, the little connector down there. There we go. Now we should be able to take our standoffs that are included in the kit. Gonna need some help from a screwdriver on the back side, so I'm gonna go ahead and get a couple of these on. Just use my arm across your screen. This is where I use, where'd my favorite screwdriver go? Oh, it's over here on the other side. So I just hold one side, and we should be able to, well, I gotta back that out a little bit, get it on straight maybe. Well, these connectors, I think, are if you're not using the guard. So I need to go into my nylon kit and get a female end connector to put down on this board. Okay, so these standoffs are going to be used if you're not using the guard, but I am using the guard, and not included in the kit is going to be the standoff we are going to need, because we need this nylon screw to go all the way through the top of the guard and then go into these four corners. So you'll need to find 4 of these, and they are probably 6mm female. And that should go all the way down and still give us some sticking out the top. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to need to do. I got a couple more of those just over here off screen. There's 2. And you can buy these little kits off of eBay. You can also get them off of Banggood. They're just little nylon kits. They come with female and male connectors. I actually have 2 of these because I was running low. So we just need to go ahead and do that on the rest of these. There we go. Now we're ready to start. And our power lead would go down below everything and then hook over here into our battery. So I think what we're going to do is just we'll start with the ESC group over here, which is from this motor. We'll take the tape off and I'll prep the lines for the length. I do use the ground, so we kind of have to piggyback those because these pads are so small that we're not going to be able to get down 2 wires side by side. We're going to have to stack them. The wires are cut to length. The red is going into the middle, and I'm going to loop it around this group, so I left that one a little longer. And after you cut these, make sure you don't have any stragglers sticking off of these. By stragglers, I mean threads. You don't want any loose threads that might touch these. These are very close together, so we want to be very careful. We can check this after we get them soldered down by using our meter if you have one. If you don't have one, just be extra careful. See, like this one right down here, I don't know if you can see that. Got a little tiny thread right off here. We don't want that. That little tiny guy can cause a short, and it causes tears. Okay, so let's tin those up. Okay, I've got a little bit coming off of this one, so I'm going to clean it up. Oh, that thread started coming loose again. Okay, I think we're good. This is always the most challenging part, in my opinion. So let's see if I can. How do I want to do this? Maybe I want to turn this a bit. So I got left and right. I'm going to do the signal first. Actually, I need to clean that one up a little bit too. Okay, now we do our ground, which is on the outside. And right next to that standoff, which can be a challenge. Trying to get my little bend in here. I'm sorry, I'm covering this up. All I'm trying to do is just get a little hook in the end of that wire so it helps me get where it needs to be. This goes on top. My blue tack is not working. Stick. Okay, that seems good. Now I've got to finagle this wire. Hopefully I've got enough. Put my iron down here so I don't burn myself. Pull test on all these. Give them a closer inspection, make sure we don't have any pads. I'm going to have to be careful. This one, this wire here has come to this side of the pad just ever so slightly, so I'm going to need to be careful. I want to do the next one. But that's how you should wire up your ESCs. And when it comes to grounds, if you want to understand the science behind it, which I only understand it a little bit more because Joshua Bardwell put together a really nice video and kind of confirmed that it's best to have the grounds connected just so you don't have to troubleshoot a problem later on. You know, it might fly fine at medium throttle, and then when you hit high throttle or any other sort of flight pattern, then all of a sudden you get different flight characteristics and you're trying to figure out why. It could be because of ground. And if you don't have your ground connected, you're troubleshooting one more thing. So I tend to use grounds. I think it's probably best if we all do. So I did one, do the other three. Piko's all wired up. This is that critical point I talked about that we would need to check to make sure we don't have any shorts, so we don't have any tears. And I'll move my meter into shot because the tone on it is very, very low and it's barely picked up on camera. So on our battery lead, this is our positive over here. So if we were to touch positive and ground and we got any reading, that would be a bad thing. Of course, positive and positive. That is to be expected, but now I'm going to switch and I'm going to put the black tab here on our positive lead and we get no reading. So that's good. And then you go all the way around and you check these. At this point you would probably connect your receiver because the port is nice and accessible, or you would wire up your receiver depending upon what you're using. In my case, I'm going to be using another Spectrum satellite. I use those all the time. I know they catch some heat on the internet for all sorts of fail-safe problems, but in my flight, for what you see I do, I don't have a problem with them. And I did a test recently where I had mine out, I think it was 187 meters, and I was actually testing FPV gear, but I didn't have any control problems either. So they work for me. If you like to use FlySky or FrSky or Futaba or any other protocols out there, feel free to use yours. We're very lucky right now because just about all the manufacturers are coming out with receivers that are very, very small. So I'm going to get my receiver going, make sure that's bound up and connected, and then we're going to look at adding our camera. And I was going over this, and some real interesting design happens here. So this is our plate, and it goes towards the back, and we line up these little holes and we screw them in, and that secures it. And that also, because we've got these cutouts, allows us to change the angle. And this piece up here, this is the CM275. This is a camera I tend to use a lot because of its decrease in weight. We've got a hole to run our wire through. We've got a hole to see our LEDs on. And we've got a hole up here to where we can hit, oops, we can push both of our buttons. Well, this one's too big. Let me get a smaller one. We can push both of our buttons and we can see what LED we're on. Now, if you needed to, you could take off a side plate and go in here from the side. But Tomo has really designed this pod quite well and quite interesting. I'm impressed. You know, it's a round design, so it's all protected. We've got a little bit of protection up here for our antenna. Plus, we've got all these spots. We can put our wire, we can see our LEDs, we can change our channels. So that's pretty remarkable. Kudos to him for coming up with a design that really works well. And I suspect, and I know I've looked at his other designs, we see this pod a fair bit. So if you get a frame from him and it comes with this little camera mount, rest assured that provided your camera fits in there, you're going to be able to change channels without a whole lot of fuss. Okay, I'm going back to the receiver, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up the assembly. Let's go ahead and calibrate our ESCs. You can see I'm connected, and I'm just going to plug in a battery here after I click, so we have no props. Going to click here, I understand the risks, and take our master slider all the way to the top and plug in our battery. Oh, there we have all our tones, and we're all calibrated and ready to move on to the next step. Last little bit here, you can see my receiver is all connected, and I ran my wires out around the USB port. And while we're talking about the USB port, I thought I was being all smart and I bought a right angle adapter, but my right angle adapter is the wrong way. I need that flat side to be where it is, but I need the cable to come up above. So in order to make everything work with a standard USB port, I have to remove this motor every time. So if you're planning on building one of these, get a right angle adapter like this, but with the cable going up. And that will save you from having to do what I'm going to have to do until I get one of these. And I'll look on Amazon tonight. Okay, the last bit, you can see I've got my camera kind of dry fit here, and the bottom plate here for the camera pod, you can see we've got a couple of flanges here. Those go to the edges of our mounts, so it keeps our mount from wobbling around, because if we put it over here like this, we would get a little bit of wobble, and we don't want that. So we put it over here, and we'll need to make sure that our wire goes down through the hole, which I should have already done. So our wire goes down through the hole like this, and then we'll connect it up in my points. So my camera will face this way, like this, and I will solder this cable. And I'm going to leave a little bit of length in case I need to get to everything. I don't want to have to get the iron out every time and heat that up and remove that. This is our positive right here, you see got 10, and then the back side is the ground. So let's go ahead and get that done. See if I can do this with, I might turn this just a bit. Oh, this might be kind of fidgety here. These wires are already tinned up. Just try to sneak them around my receiver here, and oh, I'm going to need some blue tack. It's sliding around on me again. Little pull test. There we go. Oh, come on, pod, get down on there. Oh, I forgot something. I always like to put a little bit of electrical tape on the top. So just to be sure, if my receiver comes loose, I don't end up shorting it out. It just comes loose. Should have did that before I got all these other wires in there, huh? Not as clean as I would have liked to have done it, but it will work. And before we get this all down in there, and I did give myself a bit of up tilt with this mount. Oops, this one's backwards. These points goes toward the rear, so we can put our antenna wires through there. So I've got a wire hanging out here. I've got to get that tucked up in there. And I think what I'll do is just kind of push it forward. There we go. And we take our little nylon nuts and we put those on the 4 spots, but I'm going to go ahead and put my screws in from this side, and then I'll tighten them down once I get everything in place. Now let's put one on here. This one's probably the most accessible. Should keep the mount from flopping around on me too much. Just line up the holes and put the screws in. Okay, well, I'm going to put the rest of these nuts on, and then I think what I am going to try to do is take my antenna right up and through these holes on each side. So that'll give us good clearance. May have to manipulate them a bit, but our antenna should go right through there, and if I need to, I'll put a dab of hot glue just to keep them in there in case they're a little bit short, but it looks like I should be able to get them through there relatively easy. Maybe a dab of hot glue just for safety. Okay, we're all set and together. And I did have to make one correction. You can see my antenna wires are laying across here, and I just used some silicone tape, and that is because hopefully this comes through on camera. There's very little clearance on the outer part of that, and if we go to the back you can see that that's just about as wide as the satellite is. So if you do yours with a satellite or another receiver, I had already hot glued my antennas on, which is kind of standard for me because those are kind of weak points when you decase them. I would bend it up straight, or maybe lean it back 20 or 40 degrees and up straight, and put your hot glue on. That should get you in there. See, this little tiny gap right in here, right where my little screwdriver is going, is right where the wires need to go. But I'd already done that, so I couldn't do it that way. So we're all tight bound. I got the tiniest bit of up tilt. I should have given myself just a bit more up tilt. But we're going to fly it like it is. But before we go fly, let's weigh it. I have cut down my strap considerably, and I did add a little gummy to bring my surface up above the screw holes, and then I put my Duralock on, which I use on all my micro batteries. Oh, did that zero out? Yeah, okay. So you might not be able to see that whole number. Let me scoot that back. 60.6 grams. I can't remember if that's the lightest or not, but I don't think so. I think the lightest one I had was under 60 grams by a gram or two. But pretty good. We got some substantial material along the prop guards here, and we have several carbon fiber pieces, but carbon fiber is not heavy. Well, it's time. Let's go fly it. Little sound check and a punch test here for Swift. Arm it. Hovers just right at about 50% there. Maybe a little, just a touch over 50%. Okay, let's go ahead and hit it a couple times. This will be full throttle all the way to the top, and then I'll have to let off real quick so we don't bump the ceiling. 1, 2, 3. Alright, let's do that again. Let's see if we can get it in a little bit closer, but lower. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3. That was close. Okay, let's set her down and get the goggles.
Shall we begin? Let's begin now. Let's begin now.
This is not a drill.
Repeat, this is not a drill.
Is that all you got?